And we are moving on to the emergency project with Mr. DeBosch and Mr. Ganser.
All right, thanks, Tracy. So I want to talk tonight a little bit about a proposed emergency project here in the district. So we would like to propose an emergency project to maintain our pool. The pool was built and opened back in '05, so it's roughly 20 years old, and there are several components of the pool that are showing significant wear and tear. The good news is that the wear and tear on those components is pretty typical. All right, so it's the filter, the dehumidifier, which is not like a household dehumidifier. It is the size of a car, and it sits on top of the roof. So it is a large piece of infrastructure to help regulate the humidity in that space. The filter, the dehumidification unit, and the surface of the pool itself. All three of those components are currently in need of repair. So, boards of education across New York State have the authority to declare local emergency projects, all right? And it is a move that we should only use when necessary, and this is one of those times that we feel as if it is necessary. So why declare an emergency? Well, it actually allows you to fast track the process, and by fast tracking, here's what I mean. In order to renovate the pool, at the very earliest, if it was in the next capital project in that proposal, it would be nearly 2.5 years before we break ground, so to speak, on that project. It would require a cumbersome bidding project or a process. And in the meantime, what is currently past its serviceable life would continue to fall into disrepair. So how can we issue this local emergency? The project has to be related to safety, all right? So a failing dehumidification unit, surface of the pool that is starting to chip, and a filter that's beyond its serviceable life but is still functioning properly, it is all in the realm of safety, because you're talking about the water quality of those who are swimming, you're talking about the air quality of those who are inside, and you're talking about the surface of the pool that comes in close contact with the swimmers who are in the pool. Now, currently, the pool is safe and okay for use. But what we are fearful of, or what we are anxious of, I don't think fear is the right word, maybe just anxious, is that if any one of these components isn't functioning properly, then all of them are interdependent on one another. So then the balance in the pool will not be good, right? And that presents a situation, because if we're not able to use the pool as a result of failing of infrastructure, then we're talking about a piece of our community that's been there for 20 years, is used not only by students, but is used by our community for various things, swim lessons, which, you know, you could argue is a survival skill, right, in this world. Then we wouldn't have it for quite some period of time, because we would then have to wait for the capital project that we're currently in, are currently planning. So the price tag is pretty sizable. Luckily for us, so it's kind of a double-edged sword. Over the last 10 years or so, Mid-Lakes has been what's called a traditionally underfunded district with our foundation aid. And what that means is over the years, we haven't gotten what we were supposed to get in terms of state aid from the state. So we've actually been functioning with a lot less here than we were due. Over the last 2 years, the last two budget cycles, I should say, the state issued what I would just refer to as catch-up money, right? So the district was made whole, so to speak, based on those state aid calculations. And with some smart maneuvering with last year's budget, and our current fund balance, there is enough money in our current budget
to dedicate this money to the emergency project to take care of the pool. And it expedites the process, it expedites the planning phase, and allows us to get this done much sooner than if we wait for the next capital project. So the amount of money that we're proposing to set aside, and I already went through this just verbally. There are some pictures if you want to take a moment to soak this in. The bottom left-hand picture is the actual dehumidification unit that sits on the roof. That is currently failing, if not inoperable, okay? So this is something that needs to be replaced, and if we wait, then we are, neglecting an infrastructure that we need to pay attention to. You can see there is a unit heater, that's what that's called, and those are in garages and other large spaces. The unit heater is showing signs of rust. That is, again, not abnormal. It is roughly 20 years old, but if you've owned a car in upstate New York, you know once rust takes hold that it gets worse and worse and worse and can proliferate pretty quickly. So that is one of the items that we need to take a look at. This is the filter room. The filter room, it's a sand filter. So here's what that means. It's just sand that literally filters the water. But that system needs to be flushed, and the sand needs to be replaced every few years. There are new filters out there that are more modern, take up less space, and are more efficient. So we would like to replace this dehumidification unit before it fails. It's currently operating properly. There was some work, I should point this out, as we went through this with the facilities committee. There was some work done on the filter in the last project, but it wasn't the filter itself. So there were valves leading on either side of that filter that hook up to the big pipes that carry the water through. There were valves that were replaced due to corrosion. So it was surrounding the filter, but it wasn't the actual filter itself, okay? And then the last piece is the surface of the pool. As you can see, the Marsite coating, which is a special type of concrete that goes over the substrate concrete of the pool, is beginning to chip. And this is something that pool maintenance companies recommend is replaced every 20 years. So it's just time to fix the pool, right? And I'll kick it over to Carl to talk a little bit about the financial aspects, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Nick. In talking to our architect and our construction manager, as we started to tally up how much it would cost to replace just the dehumidification system. On top of that, the filtration system. On top of that, getting a company in to replace the Marsite with a up-to-date compound, but also address some things that were in Nick's previous slide, namely. So as Marsite starts to wear off, what you see, there was a picture of some exposed rebar that was coming through the surface of the pool. Some grates that in 2004 were up to code but are no longer up to code. When we add up all that money to address all of those issues, the surface, the filtration, and the dehumidification, the initial estimates have come to about $1.8 million. And yet, what we're proposing is to budget $2.5 million. Simply because when you have a company come in and you have them start grinding Marsite to the surface, there's a very strong likelihood that they're going to find other things that need to be addressed along the way. A simple example, when the board approved the emergency project to fix the first bus lift, the board had appropriated $210,000, and 6 months after I arrived in the district, that $210,000 had shot up to close to about $280,000, and the board had to appropriate additional funds. So the purpose of $2.5 million is because once we start to take things apart, we don't know what we're going to find. So we're asking the board to appropriate a little additional funds, and should we come in at $1.8 million or $2 million, the remaining $500,000 or $700,000 will go right back into the general fund as a source of revenue. So once again, it's not that once we allocate the money, we have to spend every penny, but we're allocating more just in case if we run into some unexpected issues, we can address those issues without coming back to the board and asking folks to appropriate additional funds. So the proposed budget for the emergency project is $2.5 million. If you could, sir, go to the next slide. Thank you. The hope is that by the next board meeting, April 15th, that the board declares a local emergency, just like Mr. Ganster said. The moment the board declares a local emergency, the next day we can start getting the contractors together and start the work. We don't have to wait to submit our plans to SCD. And right now, SCD is lead time when you submit plans to them. And I'm talking the State Education Department, facilities and planning. Their lead time is somewhere around 18 to 24 weeks. So if we did a regular project, and if we submitted our plans to SCD, we'd have to wait 18 to 24 weeks before they got back to us with approval or rejection or modification of our plans. That's not the case with a local emergency. We can put the work in motion the very next day. The work can be done in one of three ways, but we have to explore each of these ways so we're not certain which is going to be the best way. We've got to go find some vendors who can, we've got to decide if we can purchase the dehumidification system on state contract. If we can do so, then we've got to find a company who can install the dehumidification system and hook up all the mechanicals. That company could be obtained through cooperative purchasing, also known as piggybacking, or we would have to go out to bid. We still don't know if there are companies readily available to do the work, but then if we find a company to address that piece, now we need to find another company that can do the filtration and the resurfacing. So we've got to go out and make sure that contractors are available either to bid or on a cooperative bidding system where we can actually get the work done sooner rather than later. So there's quite a few moving parts, and especially if you know much about pool companies, as we enter the spring season, a lot of these folks are starting to get busy with residential projects because everybody wants either a pool installed, a pool resurfaced, or a pool maintained at this time of year going into the summer. So a lot of these companies are starting to get very busy and businesses are starting to pick up. So one of the key things is trying to find a 2-week or a 4-week window where these folks are available to actually do the work. We don't have that timeline nailed down as of right now, but what we're hopeful is that once we go out and find these two contractors, we can get the work done either piecemeal or all in one shot during the 24 to 25 school year. So that's the plan as of right now. Did I leave anything off, Mr. Ganser?
No,
As Carl elaborated on the time frame, it's hard for us to identify exactly when the pool would not be usable for our athletic teams and for our community, because the amount of the lead time on the various components, the availability of contractors, it could be like a solar eclipse where everything lines up just perfectly and everything happens at the same time and it's in unison and we get it done lickety split. But that's perfect, right? The more likely outcome is that it's very sporadic when things are available, when contractors are available, and pool could be, quote, offline for a couple weeks, a few different times throughout the year, right? So we spent a lot of time thinking about what that might look like. And in the end, after talking with the architects, the construction manager, and brainstorming ourselves, there's really no rhyme or reason or way to forecast exactly when each of those pieces might actually happen until we start working with the contractors. So that's the only other piece I would add to that. All right, so questions?
So if it's during sports season, how would that be handled? So like if the boys are out or the girls are out, how is that handled?
So I won't go into like very detailed specifics, but the way that swimming is scheduled, there are other area schools that don't have swim teams when our teams are swimming. So we will be reaching out to other schools. I know Mr. Lombardi already has a couple ideas in terms of which schools we would reach out to. We would identify the schools that are closest in proximity to us and do our best to program games and practices at other schools.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you both.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
And on to the budget presentation number 2. Again, Mr. Dubash and Mr. Ganster.
right. Thank you once again, folks. Before we dive into this presentation, I just want to point out our last budget presentation was incredibly broad in the sense we took a 10,000-foot level of where the state budget was, what it meant for school districts across the state, and what it meant in terms of state aid for Phelps-Clifton Springs. We didn't get into the financials in terms of projected expenditures, and at the last meeting I said this is the budget presentation where we should really start breaking down expenditures. We really start diving in, and we try to compare our expenditures and our revenue. So hopefully you're going to see plenty of that as we go from slide to slide. So we've got quite a packed agenda. We're going to spend the bulk of it talking about general support, operations and maintenance, transportation. We're going to look at our rates in our employees' retirement system, teachers' retirement system. What is our healthcare rate set by the Finger Lakes Area School Health Plan Consortium? And we're going to talk about some additional staffing needs that we have going into the 24-25 school year. We're going to highlight our reserves, just like we did in the previous budget presentation, our reserves to offset our revenue, and we're going to compare our projected increases in revenue to our projected increases in expenditures, and then talk about what it takes in terms of a tax levy to close that budget or to make things tie out. We'll also, once again, obviously highlight our tax levy rates, show what it means for the taxpayer in Phelps-Clifton Springs in terms of what kind of increase does it look like for their tax bill based on a proposed tax levy, and then finally visit the 5 ballot propositions we have for this year's budget vote. So without further ado, let's dive into the general support. So in general support, we've broken it down into 5 different components, and I'd like to just take a quick minute and highlight all the components. In the first column, you're going to notice our 23-24 budget. That is our current year budget. And the second column is our 24-25 draft budget, or what we're proposing. So the first increase we're looking at in terms of the Board of Education is in the dollar amount of $5,503. One of the things our board is looking to adopt is policy services through Erie 1 BOCES to really streamline the work we're doing with our policy. And that increase is predominantly for us using, I think it's a Tier 3 policy service through Erie 1 BOCES, so hence the increase of $5,503. District Administration, that's the Office of the Superintendent. The $5,584, it's a little mixture of salary increases, but also contractual increases, such as memberships to organizations and other contractual increases that there are as part of the superintendent's contract. Finance entails the business office. But when I talk about the business office, if you stop by district office, you'll see that most of the time the business office is comprised of myself and my secretary, Amber Weeble. The business office actually is so much more because we contract all our services through Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES. So at Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES, we have, in a perfect world, we have a district treasurer, we have a treasurer, we have an accounts payable clerk, we have a benefits specialist, and we have a payroll specialist. We're still working on hiring a treasurer, and BOCES has increased their starting salary offers for many treasurers to try to attract some competition or to try to attract some qualified individuals, because the central business office at BOCES in the last year has lost 3 treasurers. And so the district treasurer, or the district treasurer, for lack of a better phrase, has been actually supporting Phelps-Clifton Springs in addition to 3 other school districts. So this raise that you see, a healthy portion of it is BOCES salaries, some of it is business office salaries, but other than that, it's essentially BOCES services, because the bulk of our business office is supported through Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES. Legal. Our attorneys recently advised us that their charges for legal services dollar per hour are increasing. So one of the things I did was I took a snapshot of how many hours do we use our attorney services for a variety of reasons, whether it's drafting contracts for capital projects or personnel issues or major legal issues that are affecting the state or school districts. So based on that, we're looking at an increase of $8,000. Finally, additional BOCES services. So BOCES supports our business office, but BOCES also does so much more for school districts the size of us. For example, our internet services or our administrative services, but also within this are charges such as insurance, which is going up just based on the cost of replacing items or the cost of insuring our fleet. So when we look at insurance, tax collection, and BOCE's administrative charges, we're seeing an overall increase of about $73,481. So overall, general support is increasing by $121,343, or 5.82%. Now I'm going to move slide to slide, but at any point, if anybody has a question, please, by all means, stop me so that I can just, instead of going 20 slides ahead and then coming back, feel free to stop me at any point if you have a question. So operations and maintenance. There's two areas of operations and maintenance, interestingly, that we're only showing an increase. All other areas being flat. There's going to be a theme. I'm starting on this slide, and I'm going to share a theme as we move on the next couple of slides of the phrase tightening the budget. We've already looked at what's happening at some districts across the state in terms of negative foundation aid increases from year over year. So one of the things I've done with the help of the building principals and directors is start to look at areas we can tighten the budget. And Ryan Tilburg, and being the director of facilities, no different. His equipment, his supplies and materials, and contractual expenses, he worked with me to simply move money around in those areas so to meet the needs of the district. But he didn't ask for an increase in those specific areas. The two areas he did ask for an increase, one, I'm going to talk about utilities, so I'm going to talk about it. We're going to visit the bottom one first. The biggest charge we've seen this year is in our sewer bill, because the town of Phelps has increased the dollar per unit that they charge households and schools for the sewer bill, and we've seen a pretty dramatic increase. Now, in addition to that, in addition to the sewer bill, we also have natural gas that's going up year over year. But the biggest increase by far, because a household is billed on 1 unit, but our school district is billed on 7 units. So whenever they have this dramatic increase, multiply that by 7, and that's the effects we're feeling. So hence, utilities are going up in the amount of $72,400. Now let's visit salaries up top. One of the biggest things Ryan has shared with me is that throughout the year, the demands placed on the facilities team, especially for events occurring outside the school day or on the weekend, have been significant. And those demands have ramped up, especially in the months of November, December. But now as we approach the spring, the way Ryan has described it, some of those demands aren't going away, but it's various organizations, it's various clubs, it's athletic events, but his team is working around the clock. One of the things he's had to do in order to support and make sure the buildings have been clean is to hire a significant amount of student helpers. So if you notice it, if you're after hours in these buildings, whether it's the elementary or the secondary, you'll notice there's a significant amount of student helpers that's been helping us out, because simply our staff is stretched in so many directions. So when you're seeing a salary increase, it's not a contractual increase. It's not a collective bargaining agreement going up by 9.16%, but it's the hours and salary we need to pay our student helpers in order to offset some of those requests that we're receiving. Okay. Similarly, in transportation, while those requests have funneled down to the facilities department, it's no different with transportation. There's field trips, there's athletic events. On a night like tonight, our transportation department is transporting students home after the Big Brothers Big Sisters program. At 2 different points in the year, Monday through Thursday, we also have after-school tutoring that we do for our students, where we're seeing a significant impact in terms of supporting our students academically. But on those nights, we need bus drivers to pick up those extra runs, in addition to their regular morning and afternoon runs. And that's where the salary increases are showing up, because one of the things our building principal and our director of curriculum and instruction has advocated for is that we keep this after-school tutoring going into the future years, even after the federal funds are gone, simply because of the impact it has academically on our students. So that's where you're seeing the biggest increase in the amount of $78,850. The next big increase that I'm going to highlight, I'm going to talk about oil and tires. If anybody's been to a dealership lately or an oil change place, no longer does your oil change cost $39.99 or $49.99. Nowadays, if you have a relatively new car, you might be lucky to walk out of there under $100. And so our buses are seeing the same effect. The cost of oil to just do oil changes on our buses, or the cost of tires, is nearly doubled. And so the $11,000 you see in supplies and materials is oil and tires, the increase which we need to support the transportation department. Everything else in terms of, we have some minor contractual increases. Utilities, once again, the bus garage has its separate utility, so you're seeing an increase of $1,400, but also some BOCE services for our driver training program. This slide and the next slide are going to highlight our teachers' retirement system rate and our employees' retirement system rate. So this is a rate that's set by the New York State Teachers Retirement System or the New York State Employees Retirement System. The rate they set is based on how their fund is doing, but it's based on also last year's salaries. So we have to look at last year's salaries, and the state retirement systems tell us, based on last year's salaries, you owe us for the coming year 10.03% for teachers' retirement or 15.2% blended for employee retirement. That's not something we can negotiate. That's something that every school district is required to contribute in terms of teachers and employees' retirement system rates. Those rates are set and released, and the school district is obligated to make a payment. The only one we get a little bit of relief on, you'll see in some coming slides, is the employees' retirement system. The state retirement system for employees says, if you give us the payment before December 31st, here's a break in price. And you're going to see that reflected in a few slides. Health insurance rates. I'd like to point out very quickly, if you see that graph going down, it's not healthcare decrease. I want to say that very, very clearly, because that's just an increase from the prior year. So in the last 3 years for our health insurance plans, we have seen a 21.9% increase, followed by a 12% increase, followed by what's projected now as a 9.5% increase. So we're hovering right around double digits for healthcare year over year over year. So healthcare is going up astronomically within the Finger Lakes Area School Health Plan. Once again, that rate is set by a board, and that dictates what our health insurance premiums are going to be for the coming year. So what does that mean? Based on folks' salaries, the retirement system rates across the teachers and the employees, followed by health insurance. You're seeing a dollar change in the next slide that I'm just going to leave up there for a second. Notice the employees' retirement system compared to the teachers' retirement system. It's going up, once again, my projected budget, $3,493 as opposed to $48,000. Now, granted, the teachers are the largest body of folks in any school district. But that being said, the reason we're tightening the budget in the ERS is because if we make the payment before December 31st, we get a price break. And so we're tightening that part of the budget with every intention of making a full ERS payment before December 31st. Hence, ERS is only going up by $3,493 compared to the teacher's retirement system. Social Security, based on salaries, workers' compensation, once again, based on salaries. And I said healthcare, 9.5%. But in the slide, you'll notice healthcare is going up to $209,000 or 2.49%. That's because the bulk of our district is on what we call the high deductible plan, which means you've got a premium and you've got what's called a healthcare savings account. The premium is increasing by 9.5%, but the healthcare savings account is a fixed dollar amount. So overall, while the premium is going up 9.5, this number is fixed. That brings the rate down ever so slightly, but it shouldn't bring it down from 9.5 to 2.49. The other reason we're only able to tighten the budget and increase healthcare by 2.49 is because a few years ago, Finger Lakes Area School Health Plan approached us and said, hey, your retiree health insurance, if you move from Marketplace to our consortium, we'll give you nearly a 50% discount. Because of that 50% discount, we're still reaping the rewards of that. So once again, we were able to tighten the budget and only increase healthcare by about $209,000 as opposed to more like $600,000 if we hadn't benefited from those savings. Additional staffing, you're up, sir.
All right. So as a part of this budget, in front of you on this slide, you can see that there are 4 quote-unquote additional staffing needs. So the top 2, TOSA stands for Teacher on Special Assignment. So there are 2 TOSAs that will be grant funded. So another way to think about quote-unquote grant funded is that they are budget neutral. They do not hit our general fund budget. All right. And what we're looking to do there is we currently have 1 instructional coach who is spread very thin when it comes to helping our teachers master their craft and become great teachers, right? So what we would like to do is add an additional teacher on special assignment
to focus on the secondary building, to help with our instructional initiatives, to help our students be able, well, to help our teachers become the best versions of themselves, and in turn help our students become the best academic versions of themselves in the classroom. So that's our first TOSA position. Our second TOSA position is a restorative practices coach. These days, when it comes to school, we want to keep as many students in school as humanly possible. And I know that sounds like just a restatement of values, but there are, in the older days, when it comes to student discipline, you might look at a more punitive model for how to respond to student behavior, okay? In a more contemporary model in school, of course, you have your non-negotiables with violence and vulgarity and things of that, like where suspension is the thing to do. But short of unsafe situations, we want to coach kids up to help them engage in school and do their absolute best, right? So our restorative practices coach would become a highly trained individual that would work with not only our teachers, but would work with our building level administrators and work directly with our students and families to help facilitate a more restorative practice when it comes to holding students accountable. Okay, so that's kind of an innovative ad, I would say, in this day and age, but it is definitely worth our time and effort because we need to do right by our kids and help keep them in school as much as we possibly can. So the last two, which will hit the general fund budget, would add to a 1.0 position, but they're two very different things. So over the last couple years, our district has decided to phase out French, okay, as a foreign language offering. Now what that means is we've seen a significant uptick in the number of students who are enrolling in Spanish. We have our French teacher is retiring, and what we needed to do with that French position is we actually need to hire a full-time additional Spanish teacher. So we're essentially converting our French teacher to a Spanish teacher. So that's why it doesn't show up here. But the reason there's an ad, and it's a part-time ad, is because we still have students who are mid-program in French, and we want to be able to offer a part-time teacher to take on that teaching load of just a couple French classes to help our students get all the way through the French program. And then after this year, we would no longer have to employ a French teacher. All right? And then the last one is our athletic office has been operating without a full-time clerical for a long, long time. And a lot of that clerical responsibility has bled off into other facets of the athletic office and the school. And we want to add additional clerical support to the athletic office because it is a very, very busy office in terms of logistics, and having the support of additional time with a clerical will benefit that office tremendously. So those are our proposed adds in this budget. And I'll kick it back over to Carl to continue the conversation.
Thank you, sir. So, as we look at our reserves to offset our revenue, I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about the first column and comparing it to the third column. The first column is what we've allocated for this current budget year in the amount of $649,575. That's what we've used from reserves to close our budget gap. During the last presentation, I said that I want to be very careful about using too much of our reserves, or I want to be careful about using too much of our reserves in budget years where foundation aid is stable or somewhat there's an increase in foundation aid, because we want to save those times for when we have a real shortfall in our budget or not so much foundation aid from the state. Based on that information, I'm proposing going from using $649,575 to $740,000 going into next year. So what's the change? As we compare the first column to the third column, we had used $10,000 from our unemployment insurance reserve. I'm proposing not using that in the 24-25 school year. Almost everything else is staying the same within a few $1,000s, except the employees' benefits. It should say accrued liability reserve. The auditors call it EBLAR. The purpose of the Employees Benefit Accrued Liability Reserve is that when employees retire, based on certain contracts, if they have a certain amount of built-up sick time, they can cash in that sick time for additional money towards retirement that gets placed in the 403B. Now, most of our collective bargaining agreements have that provision where an employee can take their sick time and get bought out in terms of a 403B, but we have typically paid that from the general fund instead of paying that from a reserve like the EBLAR. So what I'm proposing is, since we haven't used that reserve in quite a few years, and that reserve has accrued interest, now's the perfect time to use about $95,000 from that reserve to increase our use of reserves ever so slightly, but also for the purpose of retirement, where there's a direct benefit, and that's what this reserve was designed to do. So why not use the money to pay out employees who have accrued sick time at the time of retirement? The middle column is where our reserves are as of July 1st, 2023. I have presented a reserve plan to the board, and the board has also approved a reserve plan. Those dollar amounts match our reserve plan, and if anybody would like to go to the business office page on the Middle Lakes website, you'll see about a 15 to 16 page reserve plan where it breaks down each of these reserves and shows how the reserve is growing and what the plan is. But part of the EBLAR plan was to use it, hence we're using it, or we're proposing using it in this coming budget year, 24-25. So, projected revenue. Going back to last month's presentation, in state aid, we're projected once again, or the governor's proposal has talked about an increase of 1.185 million, or $1,185,130. The use of revenue from the previous slide, we talked about a revenue increase. Instead of using $649,575, we're proposing using $740,000, which is an increase of $90,425. Our pilot agreement, or payments in lieu of taxes, I believe last month's presentation, and I highlighted it, that we had a solar farm move into the community, and that solar farm has I believe, a 20-year agreement with the town where they're going to give very specific payments each year. Based on that calculation, we're projecting an increase to our pilots in the amount of $18,881. So before we discuss the tax levy, those are our three sources of projected increases in revenue. In years past, I have put increase or decrease. This year, strictly across the board, we're seeing increases in revenue, hence I haven't put any decreases. So the net revenue increase is in the amount of $1,294,436, which gives our total estimated revenue. When I look at last year's budget and I add the increase, we arrive at $45,767,080. Once again, not talking about a tax levy increase on this slide. As we look at projected expenditures, so right at from the very, I think in the third slide of the presentation, the dollar amount of $121,343 was the total dollar amount in general support. Operations and maintenance, transportation, overall benefits. Once again, you can refer to those slides earlier in the presentation to see where I came up with those dollar amounts. Debt service. So debt service, special education, athletics, and general education and other services are the only ones that I haven't broken down for this month's presentation, but I can go into more detail by the time we get to next month. So let's talk about debt service first. Debt service is based on our capital projects. So based on our capital projects and the bonds we take out, our fiscal advisors tell us what we owe in debt service. But what we owe in debt service is also offset by what we get in building aid. So year over year, essentially our fiscal advisors are saying, here's how much your payments have increased, but correspondingly, they also show us a chart and say, well, here's how much your building aid has increased as well. So while our debt service is going up, so was our building aid. In special education, about a year ago, I was sitting here talking about nearly $1 million increase to our special education budget because of our students that were being newly classified, because of our students that were in the special education pipeline that were being recommended for out-of-district programs. Once again, in working with Andrea Eldridge, one of the things we've done, once again, is tighten the budget. But she's also been very careful about her special ed numbers. So when she sat down with me and looked at last year's budget, she wasn't asking for a significant increase this year because she knew her numbers, she knew where students were in the special ed pipeline. She also knew of the students that were graduating, and so she was able to be very frugal with her budget. That also includes the salary increases of her staff. So I want to point out that increase of $101,690 represents salary increases of special education teachers, contractual increases for students with disabilities, and BOCE services. So the special ed budget compared to last year is going up a fraction of the amount. Athletics. One of the key things Mr. Lombardi has pointed out over the last 2 years is, in addition to his coaching salaries going up, the biggest increase he's seen is the salaries for the officials. Section 5 and the counties set that rate, and that rate has gone up significantly year over year. And the $83,381, the bulk of it is not for our coaches, it's more for the officials and the chaperones we need at events to make sure events are safe and run well. General education and other services. So take away special education, take away athletics, take away general support. What's left? Well, what's left is the entire teaching body. What's left is the aides and secretaries. What's left is all the teacher aides. What's left is our IT department. What's left is every other BOCE service. Yeah, that's about all I can think of for right now. So take everything else in the district that's increasing year over year. And I told you, I believe I said this in last month's presentation, if I just rolled over everyone's salaries in the district, that would be about a $600,000 increase. Forget BOCES, forget our IT department, forget all those. Another piece I forgot to mention is our occupational ed students. We have students that go to the Finger Lake Technical Career Center, and the Technical Career Center has raised their rates about $600 per child. Now, we have nearly 95 students going there. That's $50,000 right there that we have to pay for our students going to the OCCED program. So every other thing outside of what you see listed above is increasing $579,966. So the net expenditure increase is about $1.7 million, or the total expenditure in the budget is $46,186,629. So as we look at a side-by-side comparison, what's it going to take to get our expenditures up to where our projected revenues are? Well, it's going to take a tax levy increase of $419,189. Where does $419,189 fall? It falls at a tax levy increase of 2.71%. During last month's presentation, I shared with the board and I shared publicly that our tax cap is at 4.73%. But once again, the levy increase we're proposing as of today's presentation is 2.71%, which is just north of, currently, I'd say, half the tax cap. Any questions so far? Okay. So where does 2.71% fall? I just pulled up a little, I'm going to say a snapshot of the last 4 years to show our budget-to-budget increases, and I'll explain to some degree what's on this slide. Going all the way up in the table in 2019-2020, when you look at the 18-19 budget and compare it to 19-20, the budget-to-budget increase was $631,000, which represented a 1.77% increase, and we asked for a 2% tax levy increase. Then the next year, the budget grew by $1.92 million. That represented a 3.29% increase. We asked for a 2.75 levy increase. The next 2 years, $822,000. The following year, $2,325,000. If you recall, as Mr. Ganster said, for the last 2 years, we finally got our catch-up foundation aid money. So that increase you see of $2,325,000, that was the first year of our 50% foundation aid catch-up. So the part I'm trying to point out is where we are right now. I'm proposing a budget-to-budget increase of 3.85% or a tax levy increase of 2.71. The closest similarity I can find is going back to 2021, before inflation grew by nearly 10%, which it hadn't done in 40 years. So that's where we are right now. That's where we are in the process of tightening our budget and figuring out what we need while we're getting an increase in foundation aid, but some of our neighbors aren't so lucky. What does this mean for the average taxpayer? For the average taxpayer, based on a $100,000 assessment and based on last year's overall assessments, for the average taxpayer, a 2.71% increase results in a $79.81 increase to their tax bills per 100,000 without STAR, or $59.57 once again per 100,000 with STAR, or $25.07 with enhanced STAR. I always have to preface each year, when we do this tax rate calculation, this is based on last year's equalization rate, and this is based on last year's assessments. The equalization rate for this year and the assessments for this year won't be determined until the summer, so that's the only data I have to go on. The ballot propositions are 5 ballot propositions as we revisit them. We've got adopting our annual budget, electing 3 members to the Board of Education, authorizing the expenditure of approximately $1,073,880 for the purchase of our 6 buses plus a Suburban. Last month, we had talked about creation of a bus purchase reserve. In doing some more research, we have tweaked that. And we're asking the community to vote on opening up a transportation reserve. It's still a savings account. It's still going to start with $0 in it. But why a transportation reserve and not a bus purchase reserve? Here's why. Because if we ever are mandated to purchase an electric bus, if the mandate actually holds true by the 26-27 school year, and we have to purchase a bus, well, we can't purchase a bus without purchasing a charger. We can't purchase a bus without purchasing a charger and tearing up the parking lot and burying conduit underneath. So if we have a bus purchase reserve strictly to purchase buses, we can't fulfill our objective. If the governor says you have to purchase an electric bus, then we have to have the community vote on using money from the bus purchase reserve, but also a capital reserve if we have to do a capital project, which if we start tearing open ground, you better believe we're going to need to do a capital project. But instead, a transportation reserve gives us the flexibility to say, let's have the community vote on purchasing a bus and purchasing a charger and doing a little bit of repairs to the bus garage in order to fulfill this goal. Hence, we're changing bus purchase reserve to transportation reserve. And then finally, the separate proposition for the 2 libraries in the amount of $94,000 each, or a total of $188,000. So I know I did quite a bit of talking, but I got one more slide. Next steps. Next steps. I thought I was on questions. I thought I was done. Sorry. Next steps. We want to get more information on the state aid release, and that involves the state approving, well, we'd love to think in an on-time budget, but our board meeting is April 15th. We are concerned that the state may not even approve the budget by April 15th, and at that point, we can only go on the information we have, which is the governor's proposal. We want to review our current programs. We want to look at possible efficiencies. We're currently at a 2.71% on tax levy increase. We want to go back, scrub some of those numbers, and see if there's any BOCES costs, any other programmatic changes where we can save some money to lower that number down. We can lower that number down a little, but we can't lower that number down a lot because we've already started working with directors. Directors have already been tightening their budgets. And finally, by our April 15th presentation, that is our third and final presentation, where the board has to, by open meetings law and also budget vote law, the board has to adopt our final budget on that day. So I'm going to stop and see if anyone has any questions at this point that I can answer.
I just want to know how the community is going to know the difference of the bus thing. So, I mean, it makes sense to me. That's all. I'm just wondering, like, when that time comes, if other people aren't educated enough, how are they going to be aware of how you said it, really? Because it makes sense the way that you say it.
I'm happy to answer your question, but out of respect for the process, would you mind leaving me your name and your contact information so I can write you a response?
Right there on your sheet.
Fantastic. I look forward to responding to you.
No, I'm just curious.
Absolutely. It's a great question, and I look forward to responding.
If I read it on a mail thing, I would not know what it would do, and I probably would not I'd probably say no, because I wouldn't know, educate me, I'm not gonna say
Yep.
whatever. That's all.
No, thank you. Any questions from the board?
So what I think I heard you say is that you're thinking about 2.71, but you're willing to go back and at the next presentation,
Absolutely.
let us know if you were able to come back.
Absolutely. And once again, there's plenty of work being done at the state level. There's plenty of work being done by advocacy groups. There's snippets of information coming out, but as Mr. Ganster and I have read some of these things where it's kind of anybody's guess where things are going to land. Yes, absolutely. Between the two of us and directors and building principals, our job is to look for, even if we can find efficiencies, we're going to make them. Because we want this budget increase to support our programmatic changes, but we don't want to sacrifice too much. So yes, the goal is to look for efficiencies. The goal is to bring that number down slightly within reason, but also planning for a delayed state budget. And if the state budget is favorable, great. If the state budget isn't, we want to make sure we're still in good shape.
And just to elaborate a little bit on that, the governor put out her budget statewide, and she fundamentally changed the rules of the game about how they provided state aid. So over the last decade, there's been a phrase called hold harmless, and what hold harmless meant is that a school would never get less state aid than they got the year before, okay? What the governor did is she redefined hold harmless. She redefined it and said, we're going to hold you harmless based on student enrollment. And that hadn't been done before. And what that did is that put districts with a decreasing enrollment into a pickle because they weren't expecting less money. And when you start multiplying the tens of thousands of dollars that you get per student and just a handful of students, that adds up quickly, and before you know it, you're at a few different positions that you have to find efficiencies on. And what that looks like are cuts, right? So right now, both houses of the state legislature have put out their budgets. And their budgets restore hold harmless to how it was and further propose a 3% increase. So that's problematic because the governor is essentially saying there's no money to be had, right? So we have to go this way. Now the legislature is saying, well, figure it out, right? Do right by the schools. So here's what that means, is if the legislature passes a budget where they have to go find the money somewhere, they're going to find it somewhere else in the budget. So something else is going to pay the price there, right? So the worry is that this year, maybe this funding is restored to schools, but perhaps the governor is giving us a pretty strong warning shot of things to come. So when I look at this budget, I look at a budget that has a small year-to-year increase compared to the recent inflationary years, right? More akin to how it was prior to the pandemic, right? Our response as a district and community should be a nominal tax levy that's within reason that helps us prepare for what might come next year or the year after. And also not expending too much of our reserves this year because we need to have those at the ready in the years to come. So we're just protecting what we have now for an unknown future is the general gist and theme of the budget. And why is that? Because we have 1,500 kids in this district that need a great school, right? And if we're in the business of not budgeting appropriately and not paying for what we're providing for the students and for our children, then we're going to end up with a big problem next year or the year after, and it's going to look pretty bad. So we want to make sure that we're standing tall for the community and we're doing right by the kids. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, on to superintendent's report.
Okay.
Okay, so believe it or not, there's a lot of things happening in the district that are not budget related, right, Carl? So here we go. One of the logistical things that we need to have for next year is our 24-25 school calendar. There was a draft at last month's meeting. That draft has remained the same. The snag and the reason why we couldn't approve it last month was because we were working with our faculty association to deviate a little bit from their contract through an MOA. In the faculty association contract, there's a provision that says that we can't hold a conference day prior to Labor Day unless there are very specific circumstances with the calendar surrounding Labor Day. Well, in the upcoming year, those circumstances don't present themselves, so we can't have a conference day prior to Labor Day. That being said, we worked with the faculty association. We were able to hammer out an agreement to have a conference day prior to Labor Day, and that allows us to retain a school calendar that is lockstep with our Wayne Finger Lakes BOCES instructional calendar, which means for families that have students that go to out-of-district placements, for the management of the school on a daily basis for days off, we won't have any snags or snafus throughout the year. So it's really best practice to stay lockstep with BOCES, and we had to do that through that MOA. So I just want to extend a thank you to the Faculty Association for recognizing that and helping us work out that problem. And I don't want to go on too much about this, but if you remember, the big curveball for us was the addition of Lunar New Year in January as a holiday that schools have to observe. So that takes an instructional day, an additional instructional day away from us in January. So we had to find that day for our staff earlier so we could start school a day earlier. Makes sense? All right, so that's on the board agenda tonight for approval. Quick capital project update. I'm happy to report that April 1st is when the contractors will turn the brand new high school instrumental music suite over to our students and our teacher, Mr. Hope. So that is the last big piece of the current capital project. And I'll just remind you, after that happens, the last pieces are a repair job to the cafeteria floor and then the installation with the epoxy. That'll happen in this coming summer. And the terrazzo flooring, I think that there's exactly one half contractor in the entire state that does terrazzo flooring anymore. So it's really hard to get these folks. It's a time-consuming job, so that'll take place over the summer as well. All right. I made a little bit of a joke about an eclipse earlier, but the reality is on April 8th, there will be a full solar eclipse. This is truly a once-in-a-lifetime experience for most folks because I've been way far down the rabbit hole. I do know the next time that we will be in the path of a full solar eclipse is in the year 2144, and thinking about that date is somewhat depressing, so I'm going to move right past that. The reality here is that the state put out emergency management information well over a year ago about extreme congestion on the roads during the eclipse. And I went to the Ontario County website, the Wayne County website, and the Monroe County website to get additional information related to the eclipse. And let's see here. Ontario County is saying no unnecessary travel at this point. Wayne County is saying if you travel and your travel time is normally 10 minutes, plan for an hour, right?
It's like
And
Island.
then, yeah, and then Monroe County is saying that the greater Rochester region can expect about 500,000 visitors. So hotels across our region are actually sold out about that Saturday before the eclipse through Tuesday, the day after. So we are going to see a lot of people. So why am I bringing this up now? Out of safety and to avoid liability for the district, we've worked with the collective bargaining units that have 12-month employees to be above board, so to speak, with releasing folks at noontime on April 8th. It is a work day for our 12-month employees, but what we want to do is we want to look out for our employees' safety, and what that means is sending them home at noon, giving them ample time to get home, and avoid traffic on the road. And another tidbit that I didn't mention was that due to the flurry of communication that's likely to happen throughout the eclipse, which the eclipse just isn't like 4 minutes long. It starts at about 2 p.m. when it first starts to eclipse. Then it reaches totality at about 3:20 in the afternoon. And then it's not done with the partial eclipse until about 20 after 4, right? So this really is a 2.5-hour event. So what they're expecting is that our cell phone towers may also be inundated with information and not be able to carry the capacity for communication. So what I want to avoid from a school district standpoint is sending an employee out on the road that's congested, have them get into an unfortunate accident, and then not be able to communicate with family or emergency management. So this really is in an effort to keep our employees safe. So there's 3 MOAs later in tonight's agenda that allow us to send them home noontime Monday, April 8th. All right. So back on March 6th, we had our second annual March Madness event. A special thanks to Pam Mannon over here, Todd Clausen, Brittany Sullivan, and Kyle Sanders, as well as our students from Malo for putting that event together. United Way is one of the largest umbrella charitable organizations in the country. Through United Way, you can actually donate to local charities, and our Malo group will be deciding how to funnel that money. We are in the neighborhood of about $2,000 of charitable donations. The drive continues. That night, I did issue a challenge. I guess it's become tradition for me to embarrass myself if we reach a certain donation price point. Last year, I let the kids spray paint my hair blue and my beard black for school colors. This year, the gimmick is if we reach our goals, I'm going to hop off the school diving board into the pool that you saw earlier, wearing a business suit. All right, so it'll be fun and just a little incentive to keep the donations coming in for the United Way. We did have a special ad that night, which was nice to see. We had Phelps Community Center, our Children's Place, and the YMCA of Clifton Springs with tables. So we're looking to expand the footprint and a community feel to that event. So we'll be looking to add other community groups next year. Okay. This past Friday, we had our March Superintendent's Conference Day. We had several sessions offered to teachers to continue their growth journey as educators. And all of those sessions were based on our plans for excellence and were based on our strategic plan. So it was a very specific day of learning for our faculty and staff. And we challenged our administrators and teachers to take an active role in leading and facilitating professional development. Every single administrator participated as a lead for professional development, and we had 16 teachers step up to the plate and also share their wisdom with the faculty. So it was great to see more hands, many hands make light work, and to see that investment for professional growth. So thanks to Lydia Shadler and Jeff Hamling for putting that day together. It was wonderful to see everybody collaborating and like I said, continuing on their own growth journeys as educators. All right, next. We have New York State tests coming up in grades 3 through 8 for ELA and math. As you know, we are our middle high school is an identified school from the state for underperformance for students with disabilities in ELA and math at 7th and 8th grade. All right, it's kind of a mouthful. So we are a potentially targeted school for many other subgroups. So once we receive that information, and Jeff Hamling, along with our administrative team, got together and cracked a plan, right, a triage plan to have our students engaging with some benchmark assessments. They weren't full-blown state tests. They were small snippets. We call them dipsticks, although it's kind of a weird thing to say in public session, but it allows us to dipstick where our students are progressing towards proficiency in ELA and math. So
within that triage plan, we are in round 3 of our benchmark dipsticks. And the way that these are working is students sit for the tests, right? And then our teachers sit and they actually grade them together. And in grading them together, they end up having really detailed professional dialogue about what exemplifies proficiency for our students. And then they walk away from those meetings having a better idea of how to coach students and teach students in the classroom. So we're very hopeful and optimistic that this triage plan is going to help us avoid, further entanglement from the school improvement office at NICEAD. So we're just in round 3, and I want to let everybody know that there's a letter coming out from each main office at each building that's just going to detail that the tests are coming up, and strongly encourage that it's going to be sent tomorrow, and strongly encourage students to participate, because in the end, the data we get back actually allows us as educators and as a system to look in the mirror, right, and reflect back on our practices, and allows us to become better in the long run. So that letter will be sent out tomorrow. All right. 2 additional student celebrations. Shout out to the cast, crew, and parent volunteers and staff for Into the Woods. They just finished their 2-weekend run with 5 total performances over at the auditorium. It was great to finally see a full musical in our auditorium, staged by our students, and they did an incredible job. So I went to the Sunday afternoon matinee, and it was a great way to spend a Sunday afternoon. So thanks to everyone involved there. And then finally, I want to recognize a number of students, and I'm going to read a list that's about 40 students long here in a minute. But here's what they did, with some encouragement from their 5th grade teachers, Mrs. Flynn and Mr. Quagliata. These students entered into a writing competition, okay? And what they had to do is they had to do a 100-word creative writing entry into an incredible diary of, and then it was blank, 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 right? So they could write a journal entry pretty much about anything, had to be creative writing. So 40 of our students were actually published by the Young Writers Incredible Diary of Company. And in the end, what this company does is it also gives individual awards, and it gives an award to the strongest school. And Mid Lakes Elementary was actually given the, hold on, I don't want to say it incorrectly, Mid Lakes Elementary as a whole was given the Young Writers Award of Excellence. So we were really proud of our students. And I want to say their names because I think it's just fair to say all their names because they're now published authors. So Brooke Carnwright, Olivia Saidez, Ella Eldridge, Maria Petoiter, Addie Schrader, Adeline Bollinger, Morgan Matthew, Miles Cornball, Alexander Madison, Everett Beverly, Jackson Manley, Michael Kent, Caden Wolf, Vaughn Tornow Coffey, Graham Wakely, Lucas Little, Reed Wajad, Calissa Cowens, Cameron Harris, Jackson Robinson, Kylie Rogers, Catalea Ruiz, Caden Ryman, Logan McGuire, Mason Brown, Reese Haynes, Kyrie Stein, Vincent Steffen, Dominic Jiski, Hayden Barber, Morgan Kopechny, Adriana Malone, Dylan Wilkes, and Parker Schuster. So that's 40 students who wrote well enough to have their journal entries included in the publication. So congratulations to all of those students and to our teachers. And that does it for me. Any questions on anything that I just reported? All right.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Board discussion topics. So we will start with the suggested decorum statement and statement before public comment. So it's been a while since we reviewed our statement that we make before public comment. And so we just want to make sure we're doing things right. and recently, our lawyers reviewed our public comment statement and our approach, and they have some suggestions, and so I'm just looking for feedback. We're considering two statements now, one to be read at the very beginning of the meeting, and then a separate statement specific to public comment, read right before public comment, in place of the one that we currently read. So just wanted to see what feedback there is from the suggested statements from the lawyer.
So the two statements here, the first one is at the beginning and the second one will be right before
Yep.
public comment to
Yep.
take the place of what we
Currently, yep.
Yes, it looks good. is my feedback.
So the one thing I did notice, the second to last paragraph of the statement to be read just before public comment begins, I think it gets a typo. It says issues related to specific district students, whether positive, negative, or natural. I think that should be neutral rather than natural. So my suggestion would be adopt, but change that word to neutral rather than natural. I don't know if anybody else caught anything else. Still agree. Okay. Are you okay with changing that word to neutral from natural?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Any other feedback, ideas?
So will they be read by you?
Yep, so that's part of it, the quorum statement by board president. So I will, at the beginning of the meeting, I would read those first two paragraphs, and then just before public comment, I would read those four paragraphs.
And that was reviewed by our lawyers.
This is what the lawyer suggests we say, yes. So, is everybody good with that? Can we just implement that at our next meeting, starting in our next meeting? We don't have to adopt it. We didn't adopt what we currently say. I don't think we just kind of did this review. So, okay. We'll stick with the normal one today because that's what's printed on the agenda. We approved that agenda, so we'll yeah. All right. Thank you. Next, I just want to recognize publicly, we all got an email from Danielle McGavisk at Newark, recognizing Mr. Ganster and Lydia Shadler and Kristen Harrington for doing some quick problem solving, a quick response and action to solve a tech problem for a student who was going to take their SATs, which is already anxiety producing enough, and then to have your device not working, but in under an hour, I believe is what it was, they were able to get that problem solved and figured out so that that student was able to take their SAT when they were originally scheduled to. So I just wanted to thank our team for being able to get that to work as fluidly as possible for our student. I think just shows how dedicated we are to our students. So the last thing I have for board discussion is there's a proposal for a fundraiser that involves games of chance. So typically students can't participate in games of chance. It's too close to what's the word I'm looking for? Gambling. Thank you. My brain needs some sleep. And so what has happened in the past with boosters is that they are very clear that when they do this game of chance, that students can't actually sell the tickets. It's the parents, it's the boosters club themselves that are doing the promotion and the selling and the awarding. Like I said, there's a proposal that will probably be on our April meeting. Does anybody have questions about that? I can speak from being involved in one of these booster fundraisers myself. They were great at selling, explaining, and being very clear that only parents can sell the tickets, and it's gone very well in the past when we've done this, but just wanted to get feedback or thoughts, questions, so that we can make an informed decision at our next meeting about approving.
May I chime in?
Absolutely.
If we move forward with games of chance, we would establish that no student can sell tickets, no students can take part, and no extracurricular club that's approved by the district can take part in the game of chance. Because those extra class clubs go through an extra class audit.
Right.
And that would be a red flag. So booster clubs may hold a game of chance.
Because they're
If-
not
Yes,
held to
because,
the same.
correct,
Right.
because they're not held to the same auditing standards, but there can be no student participation either in selling or taking part in the game itself.
Thank you.
Thank
for
you.
that added piece and clarification. So, any thoughts, questions along those lines? Okay. Anybody else have anything else for board discussion? Have there been any legislative meetings since our last?
We did meet. We're
Okay.
still in the process of kind of getting the federal position paper finalized, so nothing new to report today.
Okay, all right. And we've had some other committee meetings. We did a policy meeting, policy committee meeting. We'll get a little update on that in a minute.
I can do it right now.
Okay, go for it.
So at our last policy update, that's when I let the board know that the policy committee had decided to move forward with the Erie 1 BOCES comprehensive policy manual review and update. So our folks over at Erie 1 are currently plowing through our entire manual to make sure that we are up to date and lockstep with the most I'm stumbling for my words here, to make sure that our policy manual is just as tight as it can be from a liability perspective, right? So that's happening, which means I don't have a full policy presentation tonight. The only policy on our policy updates for the night is the workplace violence prevention policy, which is a boilerplate policy that we've had 2 reads on, and just outlines how we would respond and how we will maintain a workplace violence prevention program. And that's really it for policy updates.
Thank you. I think that's pretty, we've covered all the other pieces in other realms, so, of other committee meetings. So if nobody has anything else, we'll keep moving. Good. All right. On to public comment. So, the Board of Education values the input of the Mid-Lakes community and welcomes public comment on any topic related to board work, with the exception of matters pertaining to individual personnel and/or students. All public comments must include appropriate language and observe proper decorum. Anyone making public comment must identify themselves by name and address. The public comment period will be limited to a total of 30 minutes and 1 comment per person. Individual comments will be limited to 2 minutes. The board does not respond to items presented or questions raised through public comment. However, the board may discuss topics of public comment at a later time and/or contact the individual who submitted the comment. So, Christy Cocoon, you're up. Is it on? Lydia's helping.
You got it. Hi, guys. Good evening. I'm just here to ask the board to consider possibly allowing the upperclassmen to have access to microwaves. It's sports season. These kids are hungry. I can tell you that my kids bring numerous sandwiches and lunches, and they plow through that by the end of their 2:30 day. There's a couple of parents and I that have been sending pizzas to them, and I just think, I said upperclassmen because, I think that a freshman through a senior could handle it. They've kind of been home through the pandemic. A lot of our kids can cook for themselves, and I think it would be a nice thing that if they were able to bring home, I don't know, like leftovers from the night before, or maybe their sandwiches would make it till 3 o'clock before their practices. So that's all I'm asking. Other school districts do have them, so we just something special maybe for them. If it can't be in the school cafeteria, maybe in the activities area. Obviously something with the cameras so they can be held accountable if there's that one child that wants to throw something in there that it shouldn't be in there. So
Thank you. That's all. Thank you. Adam Eldridge? Is that right? It's still on. Still on. You're
All
good.
right, the emergency thing for the pool. Are you saving that for the board now or for the board after the votes?
I'm not sure of your question.
The emergency bid for the pool repair. You're gonna do that before the 3 people get voted back on? Is that before the elections or after the elections?
So I think it was stated in the presentation it'll be voted on the next meeting, the April meeting.
Okay, those are my questions. Thanks.
Wanda Spears? I have that in there?
She probably was a guest that
That
didn't know this
didn't-
was-
okay. And I can't read this name. Jen? Is there a Jen? Possibly something, okay. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't, make sure we didn't leave somebody off that signed it. Okay. Thank you. All right, on to new business items. So, item A, notice of the annual meeting, budget vote, and election. Is there a motion to approve the notice of the annual meeting, budget vote, and election as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of A as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Ontario County application for a corrected tax roll, item B. Is there a motion to approve item B as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. Item C, the policy manual modifications. Just gave us a brief on that. Can I get a motion to approve the new, or the policy 6190 as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of policy 6190 as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. All right, if there are no objections, I'd like to block items D through J. They are memorandums and agreements that all have to do with the lunar eclipse and the Lunar New Year and our Eagle Time updating activities pieces. Is there a motion to approve items D through J as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items D through J as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed? Motion carried. All right. And on to item K, the employment agreement. Is there a motion to approve the agreement as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All of those opposed? Motion carried. L, the consulting agreement. Is there a motion to approve the consulting agreement as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of the consulting agreement as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Item M, the 2024-25 district calendar. Is there a motion to approve the district calendar, the Phelps-Clifton Spring School District calendar for the 24-25 school year?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the calendar as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. If there's no objection, I'd like to block items N through K, combining teams with another
Q.
Q. N through Q. What did I say?
Okay.
Sorry, Q, K. really tired. A long weekend.
It's okay, it's okay.
Long drive, everything. New York City driving. Ugh. So N through Q. So combining for tennis, field trips, donations, and mid-leagues fundraisers. Is there a motion to approve items N through Q as presented?
So moved.
Is there any discussion? Second?
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of items N through Q as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. All right, on to personnel items. If there are no objections, I'd like to block items A through D. These are all appointments. Is there a motion to approve items A through D as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items A through D under personnel as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion carried. And I'd like to block items E and F. These are leaves and resignations. Is there a motion to approve items E and F as presented?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor of items E and F, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. And on to adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn the regular board meeting for the purpose of entering into executive session to discuss matters relating to proposed, pending, or current litigation and contract negotiations?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. And any discussion? All those in favor of adjournment, say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, everyone.